Coming to you live from Radio Cayman Studio.
For the record.
For the record. Hear from your government officials, independents, and the opposition on issues that matter to you. For the record. Engage in an open dialogue between residents and lawmakers.
For the record.
For the record. Informative, impartial, insightful.
This is your talk show.
1-800-534-8255. Your calls, your input. This is For the Record. And now, your host, Orit Connor.
Good morning and welcome to For the Record, whether you're here in the Cayman Islands or if you're listening to us overseas via the web. I'm your host, Orit Connor, and you're welcome to join me every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 7:30 a.m. until 9:30 a.m. Of course, For the Record is a show designed and produced by the staff and management of Radio Cayman, and For the Record is geared towards keeping you, our listening audience, abreast of issues as they arise and play out on a local, regional, and international scene. It is also designed to empower you, to keep you informed, to let you know of issues past as well as present. You are also welcome to join me on For the Record every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday by calling in on our phone lines or toll-free number courtesy of Lime 1-800-534-8255. You can also call us on 949-8037 and 949-6990. And of course, if you don't like to talk on the telephone, then you can email us at For the Record. That is one word, For the Record at candw.ky. Of course, today is the 26th of June, 2015, Friday, day that most of you look forward to begin your weekend. And I believe for some schools, this is probably the last day of school before the summer break as well. So for those who traverse the roads of Cayman early in the morning or in the afternoons around about 3 o'clock, you should find less congestion on the roads now. You don't have parents having to drop their kids off to school or school buses on the road, so the road traffic should be much lighter, as well. Again, today being Friday, it is the Macfield Saunders Show, and we have in the studio with us again this morning Mr. Steve Macfield, prominent local attorney, and Mr. Christopher Saunders, CPA, political activist, former candidate, upcoming candidate, everything else. Gentlemen, good morning and welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, OC. Clearly you know... Clearly you know something about me that I don't know concerning. No, I can say this much. I am, like as I said before, if we can put together a really good team, which I suspect that we should be able to, because there are a lot of good people in this country, I would definitely look at doing it one more time.
Okay.
And thank you. I was so happy when I got my call. It's like getting a call to go to Southwell. It reminds me when you were 15 and 16 years old and you go down by Mr. Quinn's office, Mr. Bertapannan's office, and they tell you, well, you'll probably get your call soon, and you can't sleep at night, waiting with your passport in your back pocket, waiting for that call to come to your house, say that you need to come down to Mr. Bertapannan's office because you need to go to see Miss Maudie up at the hospital. Up at the hospital. So every Thursday evening that I get my call, I'm so happy to come to your show to participate with you and my friend and my colleague, Mr. Saunders, Chris Saunders, who was also, by the way, from my district in Boston Town.
We're neighbors across the street. Yeah, right across the street.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And of course, on Wednesday morning when you called in, I gave you advance notice. I said, we're going to told you the topic that we'd want to discuss this morning as well. And so I want to say to my audience, there were times in the Cayman Islands when politicians in particular were reluctant to use the I word independence. They were reluctant to talk about it. It was never, the word was never uttered on their platforms, their political platforms, because people saw it as a bad thing. And it almost reminds me, in talking to my friend Alan Moore, we always have these stories, and he was talking about when he was the president of the Cayman Islands Football Association, and they were seeking to gain membership in the international bodies. And of course, to do that, they first had to go through the regional body, which was the Caribbean Football Union. And he went off to a meeting. I'm not sure where it was. It might have been in Suriname or somewhere. He went to a meeting, and of course, they pointed out to him that you need to become a member of the Caribbean Football Union. And he came back, and there was a particular minister who's well known for his conservative pro UK views, and he went to him and he said, Mr. Minister, they weren't called ministers at that time, but member, and he went to him and said, this is what we're planning on doing now, and we need to join the Caribbean, become a member of the Caribbean Football Union. He said, the member said, but can you name it something else? Can you name it something else? Because unions, they don't like to hear the word union in Cayman.
Yes.
That was in the 80s.
Yes.
That was in the 80s or 90s. So the independent word was something that politicians never talked about, because if you wanted to really paint your opponent in a bad light, then all you had to say is he's for independence, and that would ensure, and that would ensure that you would never ever get elected. But the conversation has to take place in the Cayman Islands. We talked on Wednesday about Bermuda in 1995. Bermuda had a referendum on independence. The pro-independence lost, and they lost for a variety of reasons, including the fact that the Progressive Labour Party, which was the oldest party in Bermuda, and it was the party of the indigenous Bermudans, the black Bermudans, it was their party, they campaigned against the independence referendum simply because they felt that it should be brought to the people not as a referendum, but during the course of a general election as an election campaign issue. So it failed miserably, somewhere between 7 to something percent against, and about 25% for. So it failed miserably, not to mention the fact that also it took place a day after a hurricane. It was delayed for a day, and after a hurricane went across Bermuda, it was delayed. But they had their conversation about it. It hasn't been put to bed, because at some point in time it will be revived again. But they did what they had to do, and they moved on. What is important here in the Cayman Islands is that people need to be aware. They need to know the pros and the cons, so that unlike what happened with our Constitution and with the one person, one vote referendum that took place, you don't allow politicians to fill your heads up with nonsense if you don't know what the topic is, and you don't have some insight in terms of what it is all about. So that is why it is extremely important for the conversation to take place. Mr. Markfield?
Well, we sort of had our referendum too. Our referendum was much earlier. I don't know how much OC and Chris you remember what happened here in 1962.
Mm-hmm. I wasn't born.
Yes, it was on the 18th and 19th of January 1962 that Governor Blackburn came down from Jamaica with a delegation of Jamaicans and informed the legislature that Jamaica had opted out of the Caribbean Federation, and that Jamaica had intended to go into independence on the 6th of August that year. And he called a meeting of the legislature, and he set out to advise them of the pros and cons of what Jamaica was offering Cayman, because Cayman was independence of Jamaica at the time. Now, what they were offering us was we would have a lieutenant governor. We were going to have full internal self-government, which would have eventually lead to independence and would have given us the opportunity for experience. We were going to have a chief minister. We're going to have a cabinet of ministers, and we were going to have
Actually, I think it was going to be called premier too. It was going to be a premier.
Yeah, premier. Yeah, and the only thing that we wouldn't have as a constitutional structure would have been external affairs and defense. And the governor from Jamaica suggested that Jamaica could provide defense for us. We would have to pay them for that, and that we could use their external affair offices around the world for our use, like their embassies and their consulates. And then he said the alternative was to become a crown colony for the first time, directly ruled by the Foreign Commonwealth Office. And he showed the pros and cons of that. He said how far away it was, and that it was so far away, and it would be difficulty for us, and that we would not have the room for advancement, and that we would be actually controlled by what the Foreign Commonwealth Office say. Well, if you ever read the speeches and the debates, I don't call it debate, they were the speeches on that for those 2 days. And after the 2 days, speeches and debates in the legislature and people outside, they called a vote. Now, there were two political parties at the time, the Christian Democrats and the National Democrats. Ormond Panton, who was the head of the National Democrats and had gone into the election and had won a majority of seats, 7 seats out of 12, and would have been the first premier under the scheme that Jamaica was giving us, internal control of our country, lost the day, because one of his colleagues, Dr. Roy McTaggart, who was in his party, got up and opposed the Jamaica proposal and said that he said things like, well, if Jamaica was in charge of our external affairs and our defense, perhaps they would also be able to issue us passports, and the passports would have to be Jamaican passports. And he also said that because we were shipping a lot of men with national bulk carriers, that if we had 6 men going out, Jamaica would probably want to get 3 out of those from Jamaica. All of those red herrings were drawn across the political line, and that had nothing to do with internal self-government, and prejudiced the minds of the people. And then the late Captain Keith Tibbets decided that he didn't want to go that way either.
And Cayman Brac would succeed if
they brought a petition from Cayman Brac, said that Cayman Brac would succeed if Cayman got internal self-government, and were able to rule themselves and control their internal affairs. And so that is what happened. That was 1962. And the thing about it is that we were supposed to have had a constitution, to reflect the fact that we were now becoming a British colony, because we had not been a British crown colony before. We were a dependency of Jamaica. And the problem then is that we had a 1963 constitution. Now, Mr. Ormond was still active politically. And the thing about it, Chris, when you when you go and look at the constitution, you will see that the constitution was drafted, but it never came into force because they say they forgot to lay it before Parliament, because they were scared of Mr. Ormond becoming the first premier. They drafted a new constitution in 1965. That never came into force again because they say they forgot to lay it before Parliament. That was because Mr. Ormond was still active with the National Democrat Party, with over 2,000 people carrying voters, members in the party. And it was not until after Mr. Ormond left politics in 1965 that we finally got a constitution in 1972.
Folks,
and so
go ahead.
and so that is what happened to us, and we have been in this morass, into this valley where no man's valley, where we cannot control. And then let me tell you, it was shortly after we became a crown colony, directly ruled from the Foreign Council Office, that we start to get the first English heads of government. All before, while we were a dependence of Jamaica, we ran the country ourselves. We had the top civil servants were Caymanians. We had what they call a commissioner of the Cayman Islands running the country. And we had commissioners from Jamaica before that. As soon as we became a crown colony, the top civil servants came from England to take the top jobs in the civil service, and this has been the same ever since. And so we went backward instead of going forward. And now, we were talking about independence. I just like to read what Norman Guran said. He's a professor at the University of the West Indies, and this is what he said. He said the subliminal message is that the extra-regional powers are superior to local people in governance and economic management, buttressing the narrative of racial and cultural inferiority that accompanied the colonial project. So that is where we are. From those days, we have come to believe that the colonial powers are superior to us and in governance and economic management, and we leave everything to them. And that's the reason why in our Constitution today, we have all the power, all the administrative, political, and executive power in the hands of the governor. And we are comfortable with that, because we do not believe that we could do that ourselves. And that is one of the drawbacks that I find, that we are not ready yet for independence, because mentally we are not prepared. And it's good to talk about Constitution, but about independence, but we need to go further, and we need to prepare ourselves and demonstrate that we can handle the Constitution and independence on our own.
Folks, I want to remind you that you're listening to For the Record. I am your host, Art Connor. My guest in the studio with me this morning, we have Mr. Alan Steve McFeel, prominent local attorney, historian, and you can hear that as well. He has all of the historical facts, with him. We also have Mr. Christopher Saunders, who wasn't born when some of these things happening, but he will have his say as well, because we want to get his view, and his view, the view that we want to get from him is we want to get his generation's thought about the whole issue of whether or not we should be in a position to determine our own destiny. Please stay tuned. We're going to go to commercial break, and we will be back shortly. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record, where I'm your host, Stuart Conn, and my guest in studio with me this morning, Mr. Steve McFeel, Mr. Christopher Saunders, and we're continuing the discussion about independence for the Cayman Islands. We have one caller online. Let's take that caller now. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Morning, gentlemen. Number one from the Black Special to Mr. McFeel.
Morning, number one. How are you?
Morning, number one.
I'm listening to you. Put it that way. The first thing I want to tell you, I was Jamaica when it got independent. Okay? I know all about that, and that's why it's gone now. And the second thing I want to say, Cayman Islands, I'm not being rude to none of you. Don't go for no independent. You can do things to get things changed, that you can have certain things where you can have the higher say, get different things done. Go to London, England, have things change up. But you don't go for no independent. We don't have no one to protect us. Nothing outside round the boundary besides two little old boats, one helicopter, which broke down. What happened? Nothing. Anybody come here, the British warship can come in. Am I wrong?
Well, hope they don't come in like they came when after Hurricane Ivan.
Yes.
I understand. It was a lot of different things what people were thinking about, came out afterward. Come now. One person said, well, I wonder what happened to them when they're not coming. And we don't want them here, all kind of thing. Look here, I heard a lot of things. I was down there.
No, well, they came, but they weren't prepared because they had basically used up all of their resources in Grenada, because Grenada was hit pretty hard. But what that shows you is that the lack of proper planning by the Foreign and Commonwealth Office and UK authorities to prepare and to have things in place in the event of a disaster. They learned their lesson afterwards, but they weren't prepared. They failed us miserably.
Yeah, I think Cayman learned a good lesson in Cayman Brack too after Ivan and Paloma.
Yeah, we certainly did. Certainly did.
Chris Landers.
Yes, sir.
I've been meaning to say this to you from weeks ago. I heard you when you brought it up about prices up here in Cayman Brack. You remember that?
Yes, sir. You guys are definitely paying too much,
Right.
way too much over there.
But what you got to remember, you know, when you pay one direct price to Grand Cayman, that's it. But Cayman Brack got to pay it to Grand Cayman and then pay to have it shipped to the Brack again.
The thing is that number one, and the reason why I look at fuel, because the ship actually does stop in Cayman Brack, as it does Grand Cayman. The duty in Cayman Brack is also lower than it is in Grand Cayman. So the question is then, why is it a gallon of gas in Cayman Brack is more than it is in Grand Cayman when the ship does stop there and the duty over that side is actually cheaper? The main thing with Cayman Brack, whether you guys want to accept it or not, and I'm just going to say it, economic power and political power is concentrated into too few individuals over there, and as a result, you guys are paying a price for that. And that's one of the things I need to make sure that we don't have happening here in Grand Cayman, and equally so, that's one of the things we need to make sure this continues in Cayman Brack. But power in Cayman Brack is concentrated, and the people over there, whether they realize it or not, literally have little say.
Because they won't get up and open their mouth. That's why they have little say. They're too afraid. They're afraid because they open their mouth today. Some of the family get fired. This one, that, or that. Tell them, that's why half of the time they deserve what they get up here, sir.
Well, there's an old saying that says, every man get the wife he deserve and every country get the government they deserve. So, it is what it is. But no, it is really sad. And, I mean, I have visited Cayman Brack. I mean, I used to work Island here years back and used to be back and forth between Cayman Brack and Little Cayman. And I can tell you what the people in Cayman Brack is paying. And that's the reason several weeks back I suggested in terms of moving some of the major projects into Cayman Brack and kind of, in a sense, end the subsidy, because at the end of the day, part of our democracy is the preservation of dignity. And the model that is being, that there is in Cayman Brack, and this is just my opinion, is not one that preserves dignity. When you look at the contribution of Brackers, and mine, my grandmother, when she first came here in the 1940s, settled in Cayman Brack. My Uncle George is a Bracker. My mother is actually considered a Bracker. So I do have a little soft spot for Cayman Brack from that standpoint. And when you look at the contribution of Cayman Brackers, like Mr. Tibbetts, that Mr. Macfield speaks about, the O'Connells, the Fosters, and everybody, I mean, the major business leaders in Cayman are actually Brackers. You got Dan Scott, even in the financial industry. So it's not as if though Cayman Brack has not made this contribution. Cayman Brack has paid more than his fair share. But at the end of the day, something needs to be done with regards to the economic model in Cayman Brack to ensure that the island itself is self-sustainable and not dependent on roughly $16 to $20 million a year subsidy from Grand Cayman. That's just on... people may look at it as being nothing, but over 10 years, they're talking about $160 to $200 million. And if I was to ask you and the people that Cayman Brack, if I was to give you 160 or 200 million and say within 10 years, can you achieve X, Y, Z? I can bet you with the brain power that you guys have in the Brack, that you guys would turn Cayman Brack probably into a modern day Shangri-La or something. So, but as it stands right now, this model cannot continue.
What they need to do up here is get more business going. Cayman Brack is too dead. The place is dying out.
That's the reason why I said, we start looking. No, I mean, I have to give Minister Moses his credit. You can directly see where he's trying from that standpoint. I'm not going to say he's not. He is in terms of trying to get more activity in Cayman Brac, but that is going to take a lot more concerted effort. But $16 to $20 million a year is a little bit too much. It's unsustainable.
I think giving the police is too much, they're wasting the money.
Well, you won't get no argument from me there, sir.
More, they need to more roads going around and cut down on the pay.
Yep.
All right, sir. I said it, not you, so they can't hold you.
Okay.
Right?
Thank you, number one. You have a great weekend.
I'll know where I live. I'll think about that. Have a good day.
Okay, you too. Take care. Folks, I want to remind you that you're listening to For the Record. I am your host, Art Connor. My guest in the studio with me this morning, we have Mr. Steve McField, prominent local attorney, historian, and everything else. Mr. Christopher Saunders, certified public accountant, employed in the financial services, political candidate, political pundit as well. When we come back, I'm going to read you excerpts from article, a paper entitled UK Dependent Territories Success, an analysis of Cayman's successful development. This will tie in with those of you who believe that Cayman's success has come solely as a result of being an overseas territory. Please stay tuned. We'll be back shortly. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record, where I'm your host, Art Connor, and my guests in the studio with me this morning, we have Mr. Steve McField and Mr. Christopher Saunders. I always refer to Fridays as the McField-Saunders show as well. I want to remind you our phone lines for a toll-free number, 1-800-534-8255. You can also call us on 949-8037 and 949-6990. Of course, if you don't want to talk on the telephone, then you can email us at For the Record. That is one word, For the Record, at candw.ky. Before we went to the news break, I promised you that I would read some excerpts from a paper entitled UK Dependent Territories Success, an analysis of Cayman's successful development. The author of that paper is none other than Mr. Truman M. Borden, OBE, LLB, London, ACIB, FFA, MCM, LFICM, attorney / barrister. The only alphabet that's missing from there is the Z.
Yep.
Okay, and he goes in his paper to talk about the Cayman Islands becoming a full dependency of Jamaica and the historical background that Mr. McField offered to us earlier. Then he talks about Cayman receiving its first constitution in 1959. And then he goes on to talk about the 1972 constitution, which with a few amendments remained until the 2009 constitution came into effect. And he talks about the contents of the 1972 Constitution, about it providing for 12 elected members, 3 official members, as well. And his opinion is that it was under the 1972 Constitution that Cayman developed most. He says the country was run by teams of or groupings of politicians and independents. There was no chief minister, and power was spread equally amongst the ministers. Political parties never got a foothold for over 3 decades until about 2002, and thereafter the downward economic trend started, followed by the world economic recession. So my interpretation of this is that he feels that political parties, after getting a foothold in the Cayman Islands, contributed to the downward economic trend. He seems to relish the fact that we didn't have a chief minister, like we do have a premier now, and that power was spread equally amongst ministers. The question is whether or not that was a good thing when you have power spread equally amongst ministers. You got everyone there trying to wield their own power. What do you get out of that? You have all heads and all chiefs and no Indians. What do you get by that? Then he talks about the fact that a few remaining overseas, and he refers to this as overseas dependent territories or OTs, have been seen unprecedented beneficial development socially and economically. And he talks about the World Bank's figures and stuff like that. And the Cayman Islands ranking number 8th in the world. We have a tendency to brag about that, but we still need to focus on whether or not the rank and file and those at the lower end of the podium or the totem pole, whether or not they're we're looking after them as well. And then he says, sadly, many of the surrounding countries, such as our neighbor and our former colonial power, Jamaica, which had one of the most successful economies before independence, have seen considerable deterioration and decline. Jamaica is now rated 111th with an annual income of just $4,750 against Cayman's $52,759. Again, we like to compare our success to others. What are some? Then he goes on to say, what are some of the reasons for the success of small overseas territories, none of which have the natural resources except beaches of the larger independent Caribbean countries? And then he says, in Cayman, I believe that being an overseas territory of the United Kingdom gives the international standing and stability upon which Cayman has built its success. Unlike an independent country, if politicians break the law, the UK will ensure that they are prosecuted, as recently seen in the case of the Turks and Caicos. The judges, police commissioner, attorney general, and auditor general are appointed by the UK through the governor, and the civil service is not subject to political appointment or interference. In the past few years, political parties in Cayman have started a downward economic trend with excessive spending and borrowing, and for the first time, there have been serious breaches of the principles of responsible fiscal management laid down in the public management and finance law and the Constitution. This has led to the UK intervening under the law and requiring the Cayman government to return to the principles required in the law. And he goes on to talk more about it. He says, a common problem in the overseas territories and recently independent Caribbean countries' constitutions is that they do not have the necessary checks and balances to ensure the public is protected from politicians. With authority, there must be responsibility. At least in the OTs, the UK will enforce some areas of responsibility, but in an independent country, the parliament is supreme. And then he goes on to say that sadly, Cayman's 2009 constitution is mostly worded word for word the TCI 2006 constitution. The 2011 TCI constitution provides for many of the constitutional checks and balances missing from the 2006 TCI constitution. And Cayman's 2009 constitution, I believe that the following amendment should be made. So he talks about that. But here again, and I hope and I pray that this isn't the same member who was afraid of the word union being in the Caribbean Football Union and the Cayman Islands joining it. I just hope that this wasn't the same minister. But here is his view on it. Total lack of any type of confidence in our own local people to determine our own destiny. That I would interpret this as meaning including himself in terms of, he doesn't feel confident that without the UK standing behind him and with the, as one former administrator referred to, with the whip hand, having the whip hand on our backs, that we can't do things on our own. I'm told that we have one caller, so don't forget the train of thought. Let's grab that caller now. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Yes, good morning to all.
Good morning. How are you?
Good morning, sir.
We're fine. My opinion was about independence. We shouldn't go independent, but we should go internal self-government. And I think we made a big mistake when we didn't go internal self-government like how Bermuda when they went.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd like to ask Mr. McField there, if it's possible for us to still go internal self-government, because I heard that the UK said there'll never be another Bermuda.
That's correct.
That's correct. That's correct. Let's be factual. Let's tell the truth about the whole 500 years colonial system in the Caribbean. Let's tell the truth, and let's tell the truth about the whole 500-year colonial system in the Caribbean area. The reason why Bermuda got an internal self-government constitution, that where they were governing their own affairs, was because the legislature in those days were controlled by the white Bermudan people.
Yep. Landowners,
the landowners, which came out of the whole concepts of the plantation owners, the landowners. They were the ones who controlled the legislature. And the British government did not want, what they saw was a burgeoning black minority coming up, pushing for power, pushing for political and economic power, and for social justice. They did not want them to take power in Bermuda. And so what they did, they gave the legislature at that time this power to control their own destiny, to control their own selves, not realizing that one day that the blacks in Bermuda would outnumber them and politically. And that is the reason why the British say we will never do that again to another colony in the Caribbean. We will never do that again. The stage we're at now, they say, we are not going to allow you to get any further advancement than what they have given us in this constitution. And if we want to get any further, we should come up to London and we should set the date for independence, whether it's 2 years or 3 years from now. That's the reason why we are in this position we're in. When we were offered internal self-government in 1962, we did not take it. That's the time that we should have gotten into internal self-government. We would have all of these years now with govern our own affairs now to decide now whether we would ready for advance for not advancement and going independence, but we didn't take it. That's the reason why Cayman will never get any further advancement than we are. In other words, we will never ever get the deputy governor out of the legislature, and we will never ever get the attorney general out of the legislature. Those are the two last vestiges of the British power in our legislature, and we'll never get them out of the legislature.
You still there, caller? That was an excellent question that the caller raised, because in doing my research, I made note. I was looking at, you remember Don Mitchell, the QC in Anguilla. He headed up their constitutional review.
Yes.
And one of the considerations in Anguilla was to go to full internal self-government. Now, it is important to note, and you mentioned this as well, Mr. Macfield, that full internal self-government isn't what it sounds to be or what it appears to be, right? Because it excludes us having, or any country that has full internal self-government from the UK, it excludes you having responsibility for security,
exactly,
defense, and diplomatic relations, right? It excludes that. So you still don't have full internal self-government per se. Yes, it removes the official members from the Legislative Assembly.
Yes.
It probably will involve removing the governor from cabinet, because in Bermuda, the governor does not sit in cabinet. He stays over in his residence. He may get the copies of the papers that the cabinet is going to consider, but it doesn't include that. So, full internal self-government may not still be what people perceive it as being. Now, there are those who would argue, and I had a conversation this morning, with Mr. Wilkes here before we went on air, talking about, who would be responsible for our external security, for our armed forces if we became independent. Do we really need one? Who's the enemy? Do we need to set up diplomatic offices, consular offices and embassies in every country? No. What we can do, though, we can invite them to set up their embassies and stuff in the Cayman Islands, which means that we attract more business here in the Cayman Islands as well. So do we need all of those things for independence? My answer is no, we don't need it.
One thing I wanted to add, just expanding on what Mr. Macfield said, based on what the question for the last caller, which I also believe is a great question. We have British overseas territories where Cayman, Bermuda, and everyone else. But what's interesting is that there are still 3 crown dependencies, which is the Isle of Man, Jersey, and Guernsey. And the question that many Caymanians need to ask themselves, why are we a British overseas territory? And the Isle of Man, Jersey, and Guernsey are still crown dependencies. And if you go to Wikipedia or you research it, you're going to be very surprised to see what it is that those 3 countries can do. And while you're at it, take a look at the ethnic composition of those countries, and you're going to realize one thing: they're dominated by a particular color. So the black, and I'll say it, the black islands are British overseas territories, and the whites are crown dependencies. I mean, and this is what it is that we have. But OC, just going back to what it is that you're reading earlier, and it is sad, but unfortunately it is part of the I have the most respect for Mr. Borden. I think he has a very sharp mind, and at the end of the day he is entitled to his opinion, and I'm not going to sit down here and debate opinions with him. But what I can say is here's a fact: the only natural resource the Cayman Islands have isn't beaches, it's its people. And that is one of the biggest mistakes that we have made, and it's sad when people that was once in a position to do something fail to realize that. And today what we're seeing is steps that we didn't take 20 years ago, and you can see now why we have the challenges that we have, because if that was the mentality and the mindset 20 years ago, and which is somewhat to some extent almost continued, then this is why we are where we are, because we have not invested in our people the way that we should.
And if I can add to that, Chris, here's where we actually used our greatest resources, our people, in the early years when men went to sea. What have we talked about on For the Record here when we talk about seamanship and everything? People talk about the financial services, and the financial industry was what built Cayman. No, the foundation for all of that was the remittances that came from seamen. We had some of the best seamen in the world, and we took those abilities that we had, we exported them. They went all over the world, became renowned throughout the world as seamen, and we used that. So that was a case of us using our natural resources. Got to go to a break now. Folks, I want to remind you that you're listening to For the Record. I am your host, Art Connor. My guest in the studio with me this morning on the Macfield Saunders Show, Mr. Steve Macfield, Mr. Christopher Saunders. When we come back, we're going to have more of this interesting conversation, and I'm going to read a little bit more from Mr. Truman Borden's paper as well. Please stay tuned. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. I'm your host, Art Connor. My guests with me this morning, Mr. Steve Macfield and Mr. Christopher Saunders. I'm going to continue to read from Mr. Borden's article, and then I know Mr. Saunders wants to add some additional comments as well. We also have one caller online. I'm going to just ask that caller to hold on for a few minutes while I read as well. He goes on to talk about and says that sometimes independent countries merely exchange the administering power, example the UK, for the International Monetary Fund, and get the shock of reality that the IMF can be much harsher than the UK. He goes on to say that Cayman's relationship with the UK remains good. We have never had grant in aid to finance recurrent deficits from the UK, and we have paid our way ourselves, avoiding being a drain on the UK taxpayer, and this has helped our relations. And these are my words now. I believe that in itself is a strong argument for independence, because he's saying we don't need the UK. Right? We accept that we have to abide by the international treaties and agreements extended to us by the UK. I was a minister for 4 terms, 1976, 1984, 1992, and 2000. I found the UK to be fair but firm and supported our development and most international negotiations. Since then, they have thrown us under the bus on many occasions, and it is just because of the fact that we are so of our dexterity that we have been able to escape the wheels running over us, the bus wheels running over us. So I must say that as well. Cayman's political stability and modernization, I continue, of its laws, including the company's trust, shipping, insurance, and fund legislation, and a sound judicial system based on the UK's, has seen the successful rise of a world-renowned financial center. The Cayman Islands is now the 5th largest banking center in the world and the largest fund center, as well as the world's largest private yacht registry and a leading insurance center. I have no doubt that this resounding success would not have been achieved if we were independent. This shows clearly that being a dependent territory of the United Kingdom has contributed largely to the stability and success of Cayman. What I say is, if we have been able to do all of this on our own, why is it that we need the UK? Don't we have any self-confidence? Or if you don't have the self-confidence, don't you have the confidence in others that can lead us in the proper direction? Those of you who are politicians, if you want to get out there and say you want to be a leader, you have to tell the people where you're going to lead them and show them that you can lead, not lead with a whip on your back. Mr. Saunders. Let's take the caller first. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning to you, Mr. O.C.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
Mr. Mac, just fine.
Good morning, sir. Good morning.
Mr. Maxfield and Mr. Saunders. I guess Mr. Saunders is here too.
Yes, sir. Morning.
I just tuned in. Morning. All is very good to hear. You 3 gentlemen together. It would be very, very unwise for us not to talk or discuss with our people about the possibility of us going independent someday. One thing I haven't heard, I listened to what you said a while ago about that former elected representative who was also executive council member. I'm sure we know who that is. I'm sure you 3 gentlemen know. Anyone can really guess what it is. And I respect that person's point of view, of course. But we've got to ask ourselves, who really benefits from all the financial world? The big financial dealings, the hedge funds and the different funds and different things that are going on in the financial world. Mm-hmm. It's a few hundred people who are making really big salaries. So it would suit those people for us ever to be under the colonial power. It would. It would. I remember when Jamaica went independent, the same thing. The very wealthy merchants and the bigger people said, we should never do this. They should never have done that. Again, the masses, freeing the masses. It's just like when slavery was abolished. I'm pretty sure the merchants and slaves weren't happy at all. They weren't happy about it. And one thing I don't hear people, I don't know if you can hear me, gentlemen.
Yeah, hearing you loud and clear.
But I'm having a problem with the phone. The thing I never hear people asking is, why is England holding on to us? What is there to gain from us?
They will. The UK will say that they're not holding on, that they're waiting for us to make the move. They've always said, yeah.
Donna Michi, the whole show, don't you believe it? I don't think so at all. They want to hold on to it. So there has to be a reason why. I've always thought that it is no longer, we're no longer of strategic importance as it was in the 1900s and the Second World War and so forth. Those things are done by satellite and all that now, the military. But the only other reason is that there's a lot of money here. That is the way I look at it. There's a lot of their money here also, and money from all over the world, principally the United States, of course. But so, to me, that is the reason for the hold. And when they say that if we want to go as far as Bermuda and have that sort of very highly advanced constitution or autonomous system, that we would have to come and sit down and set a date for independence. Again, don't you believe it? They know we do not have the courage to push for that. There isn't the courage, and that's the one word I see, one quality that's lacking in us.
Well, caller, what they also do, they listen to the conversations here, and they know that it is something that we that we fail to discuss. Some people are afraid to discuss it, so they know that there is always that hesitance and that reluctance on our part to even talk about it.
Absolutely. Unsure, uncourageous people cannot go independent.
That's true.
It takes courage.
Yeah.
It takes courage.
And it takes belief in yourself also. You have to believe in yourself. If you don't believe in yourself, you're not going to go anywhere.
The one question I'd like to ask is this. To all those people who are dead set against thinking about independence or even discussing it, why do we hold elections? If we think that our elected representatives are incapable really of running this country on their own, that they have to have supervision, they have to have the colonial power breathing down over their necks, down their necks, so to speak, and looking over their shoulders all the time, then why do we bother with elections? Why don't we just ask England to take us on the direct rule and run us on the edict by the British governors here?
Yep.
And that's it. And then the call it whatever happens. We'll never know the truth. We'll never know what can happen if we don't step up and try. But I'm saying this now. We should be discussing this thing as we look at events unfolding, especially here over the last 4 years or so, 5 years, the Tempura thing, the other things, and this and that, and the influence of the governors past, and we have to seriously start to think and talk to our people about possibility, because what I'm fearing may happen is this. When the choice comes to us, it will be either direct rule or go independent. There'll be no in between. There'll be none of us trying to choose a more advanced constitution or nothing, because certain incidents are taking place that will just fitting the blocks together like a jigsaw puzzle.
Caller, I want to ask you if you can leave us there. We have to go to a break now. We have one more caller on hold. We're going to ask that caller to hold on while we go to this quick commercial break. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record, or on Fridays what we call the Macfield Saunders Show. We have one caller online. Let's go straight to the caller. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Mr. Connor.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning. I say we're not quarreling, but the question, as I see it, as Caymanians, will we ever have confidence in our people?
I missed the last part, sir. Will we ever have confidence in what?
Confidence in our people.
In our people, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Caymanians are people that will trust as a people. Will we ever trust our people? We think about it as a people. Will ever trust our people to? We think often more. We ought to think more about a country than anything else, and we don't need to look around and think about the country that we have. And so many times we think about somebody else looking after our own affairs. And I believe that in our country we have people that are confidential, and then yes, they're capable of looking out after our country.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we have people that will be as sincere in looking after our country and our people than anybody else.
And we have laws that
Yes.
will also protect us against those who would try to do otherwise.
Yes, and you know, we're not rebelling against the country that we've had. We appreciate the British country. Through the years, they've done their best to help us and provide some service. But what we're saying today in our country today, we're saying that we're old enough. As children, we've gotten old enough now.
Yes, sir.
Like my sons or daughters, while they were young and couldn't look after themselves, we're old enough now. We're getting to be sending them to college. So they're capable now to look after themselves. So, like in our little country, I think if we're not able to look after ourselves now, will we ever? I think sometimes you can't decide that all your life you're gonna be depending on somebody else looking after you.
Yeah, or even if we decide that, we shouldn't leave that burden on a future generation as well, sir.
You know, and when we stop to think in the world that we look after, we're looking around about it. I think that it's time that we think about our own people. And recognize nobody's going to look after us better than ourselves.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Brother John, for that. Thank you very much. Mr. McPhail, what we're talking about here also is the whole concept in international law of the right of self-determination. And what self-determination denotes is the legal right of a people to decide their own destiny in the international order. Self-determination is a core principle of international law arising from customary international law, but also recognizes as a general principle of law and enshrined in a number of international treaties. For instance, self-determination is protected in the United Nations Charter and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights of all people. The UK has a responsibility, an international responsibility, to ensure that we are able to exercise the whole concept of self-determination. And you talked about gave your example of your situation when you wrote to the what's called the Fourth Committee, Decolonization.
Yes, the Fourth Committee on
Decolonization
in 1968. When I was a student in Canada, I wrote a letter to them after Lord Cayman had said that Cayman had no intention of seeking internal self-government. That was when the United Nations came down and had a fact-finding mission, sent a fact-finding mission to Grand Cayman. I wrote a letter to them saying, no, there's another vote, there's another view here from other people. They turned my letter into a petition from an individual. I think it was one of the only times that a petition has been from an individual, and for internal self-government. I was backing Mr. Owen Panton at the time, and because I was young and I was what do you call a cross Pantonite. Yes, I was a card-carrying Pantonite, and I was told by the establishment here, by the political establishment here, that I would not be welcome back to my own country. And a lot of people who don't know my background, they thought that when I came, I was a troublemaker and stuff and things but that was because they had already made up their mind that they were not going to let me get a job and let me settle down as an ordinary person to work for a living. They had already made their minds that I had to go because I was looking for internal self-government. But let me address some of the things that the caller just made. I understand what the caller is saying. I understand what you're saying and what my friend's saying. But what we do not have is collective reasoning in this country, and we are not setting the priorities, and there's no meeting of the political minds that are all the prerequisites for independence, for an independent country. That is what bothers me. I was going home the other evening, and I was listening to a debate in the Finance Committee, and I heard Mr. Ezard Miller, the member from Northside, lamenting and crying for $300,000 for classrooms to stop the overcrowding in the primary school in Northside. And I heard the government saying that they could not find $300,000 to give Northside primary school children for a classroom to stop the overcrowding. And yet, at the same time, they were allocating $17 million for prison rooms at Northwards, which included prison rooms, more prison guards, more fences for people to keep people behind bars, and they could not find $300,000 for classrooms for children in Northside. And the debate went on until I guess it got so bad that the member from Bodden Town, the Honorable Anthony Eden, had to get up and say, "My God, the government that he represents is a government who has said all along that their first priority, that their most valuable resources are their children." And he asked the government, can they find $300,000 to give classrooms? That really moved me. And then the deputy premier, Mr. Moses Kilcorn, get up and says, yes, the government would confirm that they would find the $300,000 to build the classrooms. Do you want that kind of mentality to talk about going into independence? That really bothers me. And another thing that bothers me is that we've had our constitution now. This is the 6th year since we've had our modern constitution. And section 119 of our constitution states, and I want to read what it states. It says, subject to this constitution, a law enacted by the legislature shall provide for the establishment, functions, and jurisdiction of councils for each electoral districts to operate as advisory bodies to the elected members of the Legislative Assembly. A law has been so enacted, and the government has refused to appoint advisory district councils in each electoral district to advise them. They do not want the people to advise them. Do I want to go in an independent country with that sort of mentality, where the government does not follow the highest law in the land, the Constitution, where the government does not follow what the Constitution dictates to them, that they should appoint these, but yet the government goes along and they appoint councillors in the government. There is no provision in our Constitution for a councillor. It is an illegal position. And I do not understand how people have not got up in arms about this, because I do not see in Constitution or in the conventions of any constitution where a minister can delegate his responsibility to the legislature and to the cabinet to somebody else.
Mm-hmm. Folks, I want to remind you that you're listening to For the Record. I'm your host, Dorrit Connor. My guests in the studio with me, Mr. Steve Macfield and Mr. Christopher Saunders. When we come back, I want to ask Mr. Macfield a question. If and when single-member constituencies come into play, will that make a difference in terms of us seeing the emergence of district councils? Please stay tuned. We'll be back after headline news. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record, where I have in the studio with me on For the Record this morning Mr. Steve Macfield, Mr. Christopher Saunders. The rhetorical question, Mr. Macfield, single-member constituencies, if and when they do come into effect, do you see any impact, them having any impact on the establishment of district councils?
Well, they should. There should be then. If the government, if there's a recommendation for single-member constituencies, and if there's a report and recommendation, and if the majority government accepts the recommendation for single-member constituencies and concurs with the commissioners, and the recommendation for single-member constituencies receives a positive vote in the Legislative Assembly, then I don't see how the government can avoid putting in putting in advisory district councils. It will have to be an advisory district council in every single member electoral district. And so, the reason why the British government did that was to at least in Cayman, at least in our constitution, in our island, to involve the people at the lowest level.
And if I can interrupt there, Mr. Macfield, you're given the UK government the credit for it, but where the credit must come from with this is the current leader of the opposition. He was the one insisted on it. And if you notice where it is in our constitution, it's on section 119, just
yes.
not too far from the last, because it was one of the last issues that were discussed because he kept pushing, for it, and probably why we haven't seen much substance other than what the Constitution say that a law should be created to establish them. So we left it up to local legislation, and maybe there should have been more in the Constitution in relation to other than just saying that a law should be established for it. But the credit must go to the current leader of the opposition, Mr. Bush. Mr. Bush in that regard.
Well,
yes.
it was under his administration that the law was enacted, because I had a lot of input in the law, myself and Leonard Dilbert. And the law was enacted, but nothing has been done to establish one constitutional advisory council in any electoral districts in the Cayman Islands.
And we see Mr. Miller has his own, but that was way before our Constitution came into effect.
Yes, and that is his constituency advisory council. Is not a constitutional advisory council.
Okay, we got one caller online. Let's go straight to the phone lines. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, Mr. O.C.
Good morning, Mr. Ivan. How are you?
Oh, doing good.
Good morning, Mr. Ivan, President.
Mr. Chris.
Morning, sir.
Go to the last thing first, I guess. Mr. Macfield, we did appoint district councils, at least in West Bay, which I'm still a member. And so far we had a half a meeting. So we did appoint them, but that's all within. So far, they didn't tell me they didn't need me no more, so I guess I'm appointed as one of the members. Okay, leave that alone now. Constitution, I'm asking the powers to be that knows more about these constitution than me, start having a series of meeting and let the people decide. Let the people decide if we're satisfied where we is, or we can make a step forward. According to my good friend, Brother John, we have independence now. Because in the 70s, he told us that if you don't have to touch the constitution, you got to look at it and go independent. And we just had to change the constitution, so he proved himself wrong there. So he need to get out and tell the people that the stuff that he preached there was not correct. Okay. So I'm begging you all, Mr. Chris, Mr. Macfield, and OC too, that knows about these things, see if we can get people walked up and start having meetings and concern it. There's not nothing wrong with talking about it. You know what happened to us? We just had a constitution 6 years ago, and guess what? We was not ready for it. Why? Because we didn't prepare for it.
Yep.
So the same thing happened with everything else if we don't prepare and talk about it.
Yep. And and as far as the new Constitution is concerned, the 2009 Constitution, not that the powers that be, including the Constitutional Secretariat, didn't get out there and talk to people and try to, educate them on that. But you know what happens in Cayman and in other countries as well. Constitutional changes to the Constitution is not something that people get excited about, and it's difficult to get them out. And that's why you see in some countries it takes 10, 15 years to get a new constitution. But Chris, I know you want to weigh in on the issue as well.
Well, I think first of all, people need to realize that when you're speaking about independence, it basically comes from two sources. One, the UK also has a voice in this, because I mean, at the end of the day, we don't know what the future politicians in the UK will look like. I mean, you see where some of them are going, and it's possible that 15, 20 years from now, the majority of people in the UK will say, you know what, we don't want this empire type business. We don't want any more of this. These countries need to go. So people need to realize also that the people in the UK, the voters in the UK also have a choice in this matter. And I think what we need to also look at ourselves is that what it is that we can also do for ourselves and continue to do for ourselves. One of the things, and to kind of borrow back from Mark Twain, is the two most important days in a person's life is the day they're born and the day they know why. I think individually, each one of us need to know, have an answer for that. But collectively as a people, we need to do that. And until we, the people in the Cayman Islands, recognize that the highest political office in this country is that of voter, and that we need to be pushing more to a participative democracy as opposed to a representative democracy, and get the people involved, then we're going to have these problems. Okay. Does anyone honestly believe that, I mean, you look at the single-member constituency, one man, one vote type issue. Does anyone honestly believe that politicians should ultimately have the say in terms of, oh, is it that they're elected? This is something that has to be done at a referendum level. And for people to have the audacity and the temerity to think that, you know what, I'm going to get up and I'm going to decide and go this route. Because you know what's going to happen now? The next government that comes in, if they don't like it, they'll just go back and change it to the way they want it. And we're going to find ourselves back into the situation now where politicians who are the government of the day are going to start deciding, oh, is it that they get elected or re-elected and all that kind of stuff. And this is just wrong. You know, and listen to what Steve was saying concerning the struggles that Israel is having in North Side with regards to $300,000. I mean, a lot of people always quick to point to, I guess, the failure of Jamaica for political parties and any kind of economic success. But they'll say, you know what, let's look at Singapore. Singapore went for independence 1 year after Jamaica. They have political parties, but the big difference between Singapore and Jamaica is that Singapore made a conscious effort to invest in their people. And it really almost is a crying shame when I listen to someone who was in a leadership position for so long in this country actually believes that in this day and age that the natural, when you're referring to natural resources in this country as being beaches, and forget that the people is the best natural resources we have, then it goes to say something about the mindset.
Yep. We have one caller online. Let's go to that caller. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, O.C.
Morning, Rupert. How are you?
Good morning, Steve, and good morning, Mr. Saunders.
Good morning, Mr. Rupert.
I'm listening to this, you know, and I'm not a genius by any means, but I'm very observant about things over the years, and I save newspapers, and I read stuff, and I constantly think about things that we go back to the years, what I call it, the best decade of this century for us was in the 1970s. And I say that because that was a time when every Caymanian who wanted to work, or sometimes he didn't even want to work, but he found a job. But we, at that time, were living well. We had, people came here, that was the time when we had no crime, basically. People could, and I know this for a fact because things happened that it just amazed me. You could leave your house open on the beach and nobody went and destroyed your house or stole or walked in and steal from you, stuff like that. Every time you drive up the street, people stopped. No matter who you was, were you a stranger or somebody you knew, you offered a ride. People waited for you to cross the road. People did things that was Cayman back in them days.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Now, we started in the 1980s, the late 80s, when we got this thing, the new government, the governments of the day, got this idea that development was the thing to do. Now, gentlemen, I've been in this business, I've been in the big business of architecture since 1968. I'm probably...
Need you to get to the point. Need you to get to the point, caller.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is this. That we constantly talk about development, as if that's going to be the thing that's going to cure, is the cure all for us. Let me say this, gentlemen. Development, if it's not sustainable, it will ruin you every time. When we had these 3 or 4 hotels back in the 60s and 70s, early 80s, that people came here, there was no crime. These are the things that drew people to us. We had the financial thing going, but there was people. We never let every Tom, Dick, and Harry come in here who wanted to come in and open up something. Look at us today. Every place you go, you got little small businesses that are going out of business because.
So you're saying we're no better off today than we were in the 80s or 90s?
No, we messed it up because we got money. Money came into play. Everybody talking about money. Money's okay. It's a commodity that you use from day to day. But what I'm saying, gentlemen, is this: that if we start looking, everything that we do is about how much money you're going to make off it and what you're going to do. If we're not employing it, if we're not doing it for Caymanians, somebody just said that if we're not doing, as Chris said, if we're not doing it for Caymanians, who are we doing it for? Take a look at the real estate number of real estate officers you got in Cayman now. Okay, just take a look at them. Go there and see how many Caymanians you see working there. When we had 3 or 4 Caymanians, like they Hibiscus and all the Secretary and all those guys, it was all Caymanians working there. Now today you can't find a Caymanian, these real estate people, and they're making plenty of money. What I'm saying is we have let these people come here and tell us what they want to do. What I'm saying is we have to put our foot down and say, look, we don't need no more hotels. We don't need no more this. We don't need no more beauty parlors. We don't need no more churches. We don't need none. We have enough for now. And until we stop and take a look at that, we are going to go. I don't care how much independence we got. And if we get independence, this is what worries me, that we got people who, when they get into office, I could give you an example. You remember Tito, the guy from Yugoslavia?
Marshal Tito.
Yes.
He was a benevolent dictator. And remember, they survived.
That's an oxymoron. If there ever was one, that's an oxymoron.
Lee Kuan Yew in Singapore too was one.
That's why they survived. And what I'm saying is sometimes we would be better off with a benevolent dictator than people who get into office and whose only objective is to get back in and to do whatever they feel that they need to do to keep there.
Thank you very much, caller. We ask you to leave us there.
One thing I need to add with that.
Real quick, because we're going to go to a break.
Okay, well, if you look at Marshal Tito, no. The reason I disagree is that the minute he died, Yugoslavia fell apart between the Serbs, the Croats, and everything else. And the essence of leadership is not to make more followers, but to make more leaders. You look at Lee Kuan Yew in Singapore. He was a bit of a dictator, and Singapore has been able to continue their success past his death, whereas Yugoslavia didn't.
But you also made the analogy just now with Singapore and Jamaica, and you talked about the fact that Singapore invested in its people. Jamaica invested in its people too, but the political climate in Jamaica caused the brain drain, in Jamaica as a result of that. But we have to go to a commercial break now, folks. Want to remind you, you're listening to For the Record. I'm your host, Stuart Connor, having a quite lively conversation this morning, one that we hope will enlighten you as well. When we come back, we're talking about the right of self-determination as well. We're going to look at the history of the United Kingdom, the history of Great Britain in terms of it letting go of all of its colonies and dominions. Please stay tuned. We'll be back shortly. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. I'm your host, Art Connor, and we're on the last leg of the Macfield Saunders show. We have 2 callers online, going straight to the phone lines. First caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record. No calls. Oh, I'm sorry. No calls. I thought we had 2. See, wishful thinking, I guess.
So, OC, before, I know you had something you want to jump into.
Yeah, go right ahead.
One of the things that really amazes me when I speak to many people within the financial services industry, they pretty much have either a very little understanding of the role that the Cayman Islands play in this global financial market. And if more people understood that, we would see our country in a complete different place. One of the things people fail to realize is that people refer to the Cayman Islands as a tax haven. Next year, if all goes well, Obama will leave office. Euclid House will still be there. Yet, here's a president of the United States getting up, literally targeting the Cayman Islands And after 8 years of his term, we're still here. Gordon Brown, former UK Prime Minister, the leader of our governing body, get up, have an issue with the Cayman Islands. He's gone. We're still here. And for all the EU countries and their blacklists and all of the stuff that they have come with, we're still here. And what people fail to realize is what's the real purpose or the purpose that the Cayman Islands play in this global financial business. We are a tax-neutral jurisdiction. And if people understand, again, like I said, I think one previous show, investment flows, capital flows, and trade flows, you'll understand the purpose of having a jurisdiction that is tax-neutral. People will be shocked to know, and I think Obama probably found out why he probably is quiet now, that one of the biggest users of the Cayman Islands as an offshore financial center is the United States government. Between the export-import banks, when they're selling military aircrafts and trains and all that kind of stuff, I wonder if people recognize that they actually set up little companies, little special purpose vehicles and that kind of stuff just to do these kind of activities. The Office of the Office of Private Investment Corporation, a U.S. government, more than 50% of the transactions that they do are actually done within the Cayman Islands. Because you know what? We facilitate international trade. And the minute our people start to realize that that is the reason why the UK and many different countries don't want to see the Cayman Islands go away. The city of London, one of the biggest people who send them business comes from the Cayman Islands. If anyone believes that the money people in the UK is going to allow for the Cayman Islands to fall and their money train and their gravy train, because if anyone for 1 minute believe that the bulk of this money and the bulk of this wealth in this country is actually owned by Caymanian people, they're sadly mistaken. These are foreign people, rich foreign people, powerful foreign people, and once we realize that this is that they actually need us also, and it's a symbiotic relationship, it's not one way, that the UK does need us also, then they will understand. If that's the case, why isn't other British overseas territories rich? If it was just based on the UK relationship, there's one down in the South Pacific, don't even have anything. So
we have one caller who is rejoining us. Caller, good morning. Welcome back to For the Record.
Yes, gentlemen.
Yes, sir.
Just one second quickly. I know you're pressed for time. Is that when what Mr. Ackerman was saying, and it's so very important, Mr. Mark, if you want to talk about the council members who haven't put it into place, that's very, very important. We have not done that. But the thing is this, we must remember the Cayman of 40 years ago is a very different Cayman. The indigenous Caymanians are the majority. It is not so now. So it's a very, very, very different country. It is hard for us older people to accept that fact, but I've long accepted it. And one mistake the island of Jamaica made is, I'll always believe it, and I'll always said it and believe it, is that they did not go independent in 1944 when constitutional government was granted to them because England needed Kingston Harbour. It was very important during the war. Gentlemen, have an excellent day. I listen on.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hurston. Let's look at the UK now and its territories and dominions. And we will see that Canada, for instance, in 1867, by the British North American Act of 1867, was one of the first countries,
that's right,
to gain its independence. Of course, it became a dominion. We look in the early 1900s, 1901, New Zealand, Australia.
And they were former slave colonies. They were former convict colonies.
Right, yeah. But remember now, they were all cousins, first and second cousins and stuff like that. So they took care of them first. Then we, of course, we had India.
Yes.
India was
1947,
in 1947.
Only after the war.
August 1947. And then we started to see places like the Sudan. I think Sudan was in 1957, 56, or 57. Sudan, where are you? Sudan, 1956, as well. And then we saw a lot of this, other African countries. And then there were some that went through the struggles where their leaders were imprisoned and everything, before that they really had to fight for independence.
Kenya, Rhodesia.
Yep. And then, and then if we look at those that evolved into dominions, from dominion status to independence, we had again Australia and Canada that evolved into dominions, and then Ireland, as well, and then you had Newfoundland, South Africa, and New Zealand, and of course, we have a list of countries or territories that have voted to remain in the United Kingdom. These are actually, have voted as opposed to chosen to remain. Those that have voted. We had Anguilla in 1971, Bermuda, that I spoke about earlier, in 1995.
Yes.
We had the Falklands in March of 2013. We had Gibraltar, 2002. And Northern Ireland in 1973. And of course, we just saw Scotland the other day where the vote failed. But look at the case of Gibraltar. The only reason that Gibraltar has not, my belief is that they have not sought independence is because of the territorial and jurisdictional issues that they have as a result of the Treaty of Utrecht.
That's right.
With Spain and the United Kingdom, in terms of Spain, the Spanish people making a claim to Gibraltar. That is the only reason why. And you saw the other day when they talked about joint sovereignty or something like that with the UK, that the Gibraltarians rejected that, and as a result of it, because it said Gibraltar held a referendum on whether or not to share sovereignty with Spain, they rejected the proposal by a 98.4% to 1.02% in favor of remaining sole British overseas territory, because they didn't want that issue. Other than that, Gibraltar operates similar to Bermuda in that respect. Cayman Islands are not listed there, and the reason that the Cayman Islands are not listed there is because we haven't even gotten beyond the discussion stage yet amongst ourselves about independence, much less, coming to a referendum on whether or not we should go that way. We haven't even started talking about it. It's like we're still in the crib. We haven't even learned to walk yet.
Well, definitely, because I think one of the last peoples that I think I probably was one of the last ones that went to the UN, that appeared before the UN Decolonization Committee, when St. Lucia was the chairing the committee. And of course, I took the statement from the cabinet, which states that the Caymanian people had no
desire,
intention to seek any further advancement in their constitution, because they had no mandate from the people, which is true.
Because they never sought it.
Because they never sought it. They have the mandate, they never sought it. But someone said that we I don't know how long they'll allow you to do this on the radio, Mr. For the Record, but perhaps it would be good if you could take this out to the communities sometimes, and out into the grassroots.
Well, one of the reasons that we raised this was because I think there's a debate that's going on in one of the schools in relation to independence. So that revived my interest in talking about it here as well, because which is good that at least we have our students talking about it.
I will say this much: our people are so disjointed at this point. We are so far from independence. I mean, we can't even come together as a people. And until we start having a clear vision for this country, what it is that we want this country to look like in 2020, 2025 and beyond, then we can start looking at that. But for right now, we just need to start even just having a clear vision.
And I'm going to let you continue on your wrap-up.
Sorry. The thing about it is, going back to what I said earlier, is that we need to know what we're doing. We need to know where we're going. If you don't know where you're going, any road can take you there. And we if we look back, we could have done a much better job in terms of making our people's lives better. And if we have to be honest, we failed. I mean, we were talking about independence earlier. One of the things that I remember when Siaga was leaving office, he had basically said that his biggest mistake post-independence was successive governments in Jamaica invested a lot of money in education, but where they should have put the money was in basic education. And when you look at, the criminals of today weren't born today. You go back into the 1990s. And I'm glad you read what you read this morning, because it kind of put in extent some kind of lack of investment back then in our people, and why we have some of the problems that we have today. But we need to sit down. We have a lot of talent in this country. We have a lot of good people in this country. And we need to start having more forums, more discussions, like it's a participative democracy, going out, talking to the people, engaging the people. See if we can start saying, let us at least agree first where we as a people, where we as a country need to be. People still refer to the government, referring to the PPM or the UDP. No, they are administrations. The government has always been the people. And as I said, until we put the mindset and accept the mindset that the highest political office in this country is that of a voter, things will change. People need to understand that they're the ones that are calling the shot. Don't let politicians sit down and ramrod anything down your throat. Don't let them sit down and just decide what it is that they want to do. Major decisions like going back to the single-member constitution, one man, one vote, that needs to go back to the people. Politicians cannot be the ones deciding, is it that they should be hired? That is not their job. That's a little bit too audacious of them, and the people need to just start saying, no, enough is enough. We have a lot of priorities in this country we need to be focused on. The cost of living, we saw the survey recently confirming what we already know. Even expats are now saying we're like the third ice in the world or something. Cost of living is killing people. House insurance is killing people. Gas bill is killing people. And yet the government have all of this surplus and people are still struggling. We need to change our complete mindset.
Okay. Before I go to Mr. Markfield, and I know you have some figures there as well. And one of the things that I want to remind our listening audience is that because of the makeup of the Cayman Islands population now, if we don't start the discussion, have the discussion, and make decisions, there's going to come a point in time when the people who are making the decisions via the ballot box, be it in a general election or a referendum, may be people who already come from independent countries and may not have a desire or may not have a desire, to move the Cayman Islands forward constitutionally because it doesn't really matter to them. For those who it will matter to, we need to take that start having those conversations now, because the balance of power is going to change in this country in terms of who will have their say at the ballot box, Mr. Markfield.
Yes, and coming back to what you're saying, I'd just like to throw some statistics. The census in 2010 says that the national population broken down into figures showed that 56.3% are Caymanian and 43.7% are non-Caymanian. That's a large large amount of people, and then in Georgetown, for instance, the capital of the country, which has 51% of the population of the country, 40.6% are Caymanians and 64% are non-Caymanians. That's a lot of people. And when you and bear in mind that people who come, the minorities who come from outside and then become the majority, they are the ones who always try to protect the rights that they have acquired in the new country. And they are the ones who are going to look for the advancement in whatever constitutional position they can find to protect themselves and their children and their grandchildren for generations to come.
Okay, final wrap-up.
And that brings me into what I have keep saying, and I will continue to say it as long as you invite me onto this program, that our hypocrisy in this island has no bounds. Here we are, we hypocritically, every time we get the public chance, keep saying that our children are our most precious resources. And yet, when we have over $100 million in surplus, we can't find $300,000 to find extra classrooms for our children so that they can have learn properly, and they can exercise the right to good teaching in the classrooms, and yet at the same time, out of the same mouth, we are allocating $17 million to a prison to build more prison rooms and more gates and more fences to keep people behind bars. That is hypocrisy at the highest, and that makes me believe that I have very low lack of confidence in the system that now runs the country. Thank you.
No, our new political party coming.
Folks, I want to remind you that you've been listening to For the Record. I have been your host, Art Connor. My guest in the studio with me this morning, we had prominent local attorney, Mr. Steve McField, and certified public accountant, works in the financial services industry, Mr. Christopher Saunders, the McField Saunders show, as I jokingly refer to it as. I want to thank you for allowing us into your homes, into your places of work, into your vehicles as you traverse the roads of the Cayman Islands. I want to give a big shout out there to those guys in the construction field as well. I know I go to some buildings after I leave here and they have their radio going on in there. Of course, they may switch to another station by the time I get there because I'm off the air at that point in time. But you know who you are out there, and I want to thank you also, for listening in. I want to remind you that we are our brothers and our sisters keepers. There is always someone out there who's less fortunate than we are, and I ask you to extend a helping hand, to them. We should always consider those who need, not necessarily those who want. I encourage you to continue to listen to Radio Cayman, your favorite radio station, the radio station that you, the people of the Cayman Islands, own as well. I say to you, have a great weekend, stay safe, God bless, and remember to rejoin For the Record on Monday morning at the same time, 7:30. God bless.
Informative, impartial, insightful.
This is your talk show.
1-800-534-8255. Your calls, your input. This is For the Record.